Welcome to our Tech Tip video 2 for the SNUGGLE KAL. Today I'm going to show you how to do a one round buttonhole as opposed to the more conventional buttonhole, which would take up 2 rounds. So by conventional I mean traditionally we work across to where the buttonhole should commence, and then we cast off the number of stitches required by the pattern. In this particular pattern, the Snuggle is real, we're asked to cast off 2 stitches. Then we would work across, cast off 2 stitches for the second buttonhole, work to the end. The second round would be where we cast on the 2 stitches over top of the buttonhole opening. Sometimes you may find that the conventional buttonhole method does leave a sloppy side edge. Because we're working this as a 2-sided casing with a drawstring threaded through those buttonholes, it really doesn't matter. The drawstring is going to hide the sloppy edge. But, you know, we're doing a knit along, so why not learn something new? And maybe if you like this method, you'll be able to use it in the future on cardigans and vests, and just have a nicer looking buttonhole. Okay, so I have worked across my buttonhole round to the appropriate number of stitches. I think it was 63. So the pattern is calling for me to bind off 2 stitches. So I am going to I'm going to take back 1 stitch. So slight correction there. Instead of working across the number of stitches that the pattern calls for, deduct 1. That's going to become a slip stitch for this method. So I've worked across 62 stitches in the appropriate pattern, and the 63rd stitch I'm going to bring the yarn to the front of my work and slip the next stitch purlways. Then I'm going to bring the yarn to the back of my work and leave it at the back for the next section. Now I'm ready to cast off 2 stitches from the left needle, but I won't be working those in ribbing, which you would do in a traditional buttonhole. I'm going to slip purlways the first stitch, slip purlways the second stitch. Okay, and then with my left needle I'm going to pass the first stitch over the second, which is a cast off, but it is not with the working yarn. It's a slip stitch cast off. So I've done 1 cast off. I'm going to slip 1 more stitch from the left needle to the right, and with my left needle I'm going to slip the first stitch over the second. I'll be able to demonstrate a second time as I get down to the next buttonhole, so if you missed that or if it wasn't quite clear, please be patient. Okay, so I'm going to slip the remaining stitch back to the left needle because it has not been worked yet. And my yarn has been sitting nicely at the back of my work, and I'm going to do the backwards loop cast on. So I'm casting on the 2 stitches to replace the 2 that I've taken off. So use your thumb and come in backwards when you make your loop. See how it crisscrosses? And then slide the loop onto the right needle. That's 1 backwards loop cast on. And again, take your thumb at the back of the yarn, bring it forward so it crisscrosses at the base of your thumb, and slide the second stitch on. Just tighten a little bit. So now we've created the base of our buttonhole and the top of our buttonhole. So I'm going to work across 22 stitches, which the pattern calls for, and I'm going to deduct 1 for my slip stitch. So I better not talk for a moment. 20, 21, and I'm not going to work the last stitch as a purl. I'm going to use it as a slip stitch to begin my one round buttonhole method. So I'm bringing the yarn to the front of the work. I'm slipping my next stitch off the left needle purlways. That means we're not twisting the stitch, it's staying in its right position. And then I'm passing my yarn to the back of the work. Okay, so I'm doing the same thing I did on the first buttonhole. I'm going to slip the first stitch on the left needle purlways and the second stitch, and I'm going to do a slip stitch cast off, which is passing the first stitch over the second. That counts as one cast off. Then I have to slip one more stitch, pass it over, and that counts as my second stitch cast off. It's still just as stretchy as a regular knitted cast off, but we didn't bring the working yarn across. We have to keep it at the beginning of the buttonhole to be able to cast on our 2 stitches. Isn't it magic? So I'm passing my unworked stitch back to the left needle, and then before I start ribbing again, I take my working yarn and my left thumb and make a backwards loop and cast on 1 stitch. Cast on a second. Okay, so now I can continue in the ribbing pattern as set to the end of the round. We're not quite finished this technique though, so please be patient until I start the next round. There's one little improvement that we're going to make. Can you figure out what that is? This is such a beautiful project to work on. It's got a fair bit of weight to it. The stitches are very bouncy and elastic, and it just has that really nice tactile texture thanks to the mosaic knitting. So this one row or one round buttonhole method can be used for any size buttonhole. Generally, I use it for a 2-stitch cast off buttonhole or larger, like a 3 or a 4 stitch. If it's a very small buttonhole that calls for 1 stitch cast off, I wouldn't bother doing this. I would convert to a yarn over, knit 2 together method. But because we're doing an I-cord drawstring for this project, we need a little bit larger buttonhole. Okay, I'm just working up to the beginning or the end of my round, beginning of the next round. Slip my marker. So now I'm going to work in ribbing till I am 1 stitch before my first buttonhole. You'll be able to identify it because that little slip bar is evident at the front of the last stitch before the opening. And that's something in this method that bothered me, so I found a way to improve upon it, and I think you'll like it. So I'm working across, I think, 62 stitches in my ribbing. I'm not counting because I know that the opening will be obvious when I get there. Okay, there it is. Good. It would be hard to knit right past it and not notice. And although it seems a little bit small on this round, it will stretch as you get further away from it. Okay, so can you see what area needs improvement? Here is the buttonhole. The cast on 2, they're quite nice. the stitch on the left is quite neat. It's that bar that's not attached to anything because it was a slip over. So easy to do. It's a purl stitch, so I'm going to purl that bar together with the stitch. If it happened to be a knit stitch, you would knit it together with the knit stitch. So you're staying in sequence. So I'm just going to lift up my purl stitch and at the same time lift up the bar. Better do that again. My yarn's in the wrong place. Okay, let me try this the English way. Coming into my purl stitch, my yarn's in the front of my work, and I'm picking up that bar, and then I'm simply going to purl under the bar and through the stitch. That just tightens up the bar and makes it invisible. And I have to continue in my rib sequence. So I've just done one purl. So one of the new cast on stitches should be a purl, and then I'm going to do knit 2. Purl 2. So let me repeat it again on the next buttonhole. That's a great thing about this pattern. You get to see it twice, this new technique. There. Now isn't that a beautiful buttonhole? No lazy edge, just perfectly round, neat. It's sort of hidden between the ribbing, but it also stretches out as it needs to accommodate the I-cord. So on we go, knit 2, purl 2 to the next opening, and we'll deal with that little slip stitch. Okay, so I've worked up to the second opening. I can see that this is the stitch with the bar in front, and it is a purl, of course, because we had an even number in between. So I'm going to switch to English method, going in purl ways, lifting up the bar, so I've got the 2 together, and then simply purl 2 together. Under both. And now I have to go back to my European way. So we're purling one of the cast on stitches to stay in sequence, and then we're knitting the next one and the next, and voila, back into our ribbing sequence. And there we go. Okay, hope you enjoyed this newer method of making your buttonholes. That will fit at least, if you were doing a buttonhole on a garment and you had to sew buttons on, that would fit easily a button the size of a quarter. Enjoy working on your snuggle cowl, and I will upload the next video which will show us how to join the casing to the inside of the cowl. Thanks for watching.